Assalamu alaikum everyone, Ex-Aviation Cadet Sabir Shah here again. First of all, a disclaimer, this video is not on the behalf of Pakistan Air Force, Ministry of Defense, Civil Aviation Authority or Pakistan International Airlines. All the opinions, observations are made by myself and I should be held accountable for anything to be used in the courts. Today I came through another genius on aircraft crashes about PK8303, and I have been following this person for a very long time, and his name is Mini Air Crash Investigations. And I would say that he's a good narrator. And narrator, I would say, in a sense that he reads the reports, published reports pretty well. His video presentation, he makes a kind of a simulation, using whatever application he uses, whatever video game he uses, and he makes those simulations look really well. Because, see, this is a world of aesthetic and what people want to hear, what people want to see. Actually, this channel, he does show that. So I would give him a thumbs up on that. But my standard is at the moment is PK8303, and I measure all other reports on the basis of that one. So I came up with the conclusion that AI, the artificial intelligence, you could use that to read a report, and they would do a perfect job, a better job than any human beings, because they can't think. They are just the narrators. So in this video of his, which published on March 5th, and he reported the what you call the incident, how that happened. Now, I have no problems with even with reporting, with reading a report as well. I have no problems with that as well, because that's what the report says. And for me, the report is not Bible, not Quran, not Gita, not any of the holy scripts that are meant to be true. Okay, so I'm just quotation. I even read out those as well, but this report is not Bible. Okay, any report is not Bible. Just like if a plane crash can be in error, full of mistakes, the reports can also be. So my job over here is to, as a pilot, the give the point of view of the pilots when they were going through this thing. That's all what I do. Okay, if you are in that kind of situation, how would you react? If any pilot were under that situation, how would that pilot react? Those people who actually put themselves in the pilot's feet, because they were the ones who actually did that, who crashed that plane onto the ground, and 99 lives were lost. So before blaming them solely, yeah, we should need to know what they were going through, what kind of circumstances they were given, what kind of conditions they were given, and that's how we can come up with an opinion. But again, most of the viewers are, I would say that they're not even close to having any aviational laws. They go with the with the aviation experience. What any common audience would do would try to find out the reason, and the reason derived by these narrators is based on not on their own experience. Yeah, that's that. I could say that totally. Your experience have to be put into the local operating procedures. You're talking about standard operating procedures, and you're not talking about the local operating procedures. There are LOPs and there are SOPs. LOPs can violate SOPs, and in some areas they do, like the Singapore airport. Yeah, when the landing is over there, Kathmandu airport. Now, with a common SOP, you can never land on Kathmandu air, because we had one airplane, a PIA, Pakistan International Airline, got crashed because their descent is very, like staircases kind of descent, and a lot of people died. Even my university mate's father was the first engineer on that aircraft, and He gave his life. So SOPs and LOPs. So you are not in Pakistan. You don't know about the LOPs in Pakistan. All these the famous narrators of the reports. So first thing I would mention of that one. Now let's get to his video because his video is already 17 minutes long, and I speak a lot. The reason being is my channel is not monetized. It can never be monetized because I'm in China. So I don't need much subscribers. I just put my things on the record, and that's enough for me. So it's not that I'm ungrateful to my 75 subscribers. Thank you very much. You are all organic people who actually like my content. So I make all my videos because a few people, those 75 people. And I see a lot of feedback through my real subscribers, those are 75 people. And I get like 90 to 95% of my subscribers watching my channel. Enough for me. Because again, I said, I have no intentions to be monetized here, and it's just my experience, and I just gave the pilot's point of view and how an incident or accident would have been avoided. No one tells you, not even in this PKA 303 report, it says that how can you avoid the same thing in the future? Nothing is written there. Instead, they just put the blame on the dead people, and they got their living ones saved. They were equally responsible. Okay, if there's a cause and effect, and every effect has to be measured by the pilot. But who created that cause? Let's go again. Previously, I've done a initial assessment with a mentor pilot and Brancolario channel, Juan Brown. And if you go back and see their 3-year-old video, when they were talking about 8303, I would give a hats off to mentor pilot on that one because he himself is a pilot, so is Juan Brown, and he actually he knows the pain of the people who have lost their lives, their beloved lives. So he was pushing, and I could see that even to his audience, even to his subscribers, even to his viewers, he was trying to tell them to not to judge anyone and wait for the final report. And when later on, when Juan Brown joined him, he advised him the same thing. And when they started to talk about PK53, he made sure that Juan Brown is also not going to be judgmental on the pilots and stuff like that. And they did a good job. But I have the same video on the same day about the incident, giving pilot's point of view, and with all the given information which those two people had, one is a 737 pilot and one is a Airbus 320, and I've never flown a Airbus 320 or 737 or any kind of passenger aircrafts. I was enrolled in Pakistan Air Force as a fighter pilot, and I have flown Shock and K-8 and T-37 Tweety Bird. And I have less than 200 hours of flying experience, but the basic flying is always the same, no matter you're flying autopilot and you're moving the knobs to get the plane, but the aviational understanding is still the same. The aerodynamics of the plane doesn't change. The aero engines of the plane doesn't change. So all the basic maneuvering still goes on the same basic laws of aviation. So even you have to turn a knob, we have to turn a control column, or in this case, Airbus has to move the side stick left, right, up, down. It still goes the same aviational laws. That's it, period. So my video 3 years ago, because those people were obsessed with the initial report that, oh, they landed without the landing gears and they crashed into the runway and they didn't initiate go round and blah, 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 blah. I'll post a link of my 3-year-old video that what I believed, and final report confirmed that. I believed that there's no way with Airbus safety systems, alarm systems and everything, and the pilot's experience, there was no way that they didn't extend the landing gears, which confirmed that they did extend their landing gears. And with their experience, there's no way they didn't initiate a go-around at the height which they should be going around. And they did initiate at 2,000 feet above ground level, 1.5 nautical miles away from the runway. it's written on the report. Now, how you read it, it depends on you. How you please your audience depends on you. AI would do a better job. So let's get to this report quickly. And let me play it because here we go. So starting from the beginning.
This is the story of Pakistan International Airlines Flight A303.
Oh, I love his voice, by the way. This is not AI voice.
On the 22nd of May.
Wait, I was trying to praise you, guy. Hold on, hold your horses. so, I will drop his channel's link because he has over. Let me check. I'm on my other phone. 117K hits in how many hours? Just a day ago. So in 24 hours, and with 75 subscribers, I get 60 to 70 hits. But my watch time is around 80 to 90%. That when people watch my BS, whatever I say, which is always a descending note, which is always different. But I've proven that I was most of the times I was right to assess an accident's initial reasons and then causes, and then come up with the solution. Now let's start.
2020, almost 4 years ago at the time of recording this video, Pakistan and the world at large was emerging from the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, so in the beginning, he's just telling the background of how this flight was special because it was pandemic time, and then there was lockdown all over the world. So once the pandemic's first restrictions were lifted, it was the first flight through that.
Pakistan was one of those countries. Hence the flight from Lahore to Karachi. The Airbus A320 took off with no issues, and within no time it was closing in on Karachi. The pilots were in touch with Karachi Control, and they were assigned the Nawab Shah 2 Alpha Star, or standard terminal arrival. Today they...
So you heard, now that's his opinion. He claimed that the aircraft had no issues. He should, anyone should ask him to point out at the final report where it says the aircraft had no issues. I'm not saying that it had issues or not. Did it have issues or did it not? The report doesn't say that. So it's a Schrodinger's cat, which is equally dead and alive at the same time, given the conditions. So you cannot give the answer that the cat is dead or that the cat is alive. Period. It depends on you how you take it, on your own perception. And it depends on you how you want your audience to read it, to understand it. And that's what they do. False perception. Now, listen to the other thing. Initially, aircraft PK-8303 was in touch with the tower control, the Karachi tower control on top of this tower, the glass building. And normally they take over once you switch to another aerodrome. And yes, they were in touch with each other on the frequency, which was already in the flying manual. So easy, when Lahore to Karachi, they know the distance, and then they switch their knobs to the certain frequency. In this case, it was 123.5, 123.5 for the tower control Karachi. The report says that. So now let's listen. What was the initial thing given to, the initial approach given to this PK-8303?
It would be landing on runway 25 left. Think of a star as an airway to get near an airport. The first officer was flying...
Okay. Nawab Shah. Nawab Shah is a small town near Karachi City, and that's the joining point where the aircrafts, they go first. They descend down to a certain, how in a holding pattern in a sense, like circular, descend down to a certain point, and then they have a certain heading and they fly towards the first joining point. Actually, in this case, it would be the second joining point, which is the Makli in this case, and then they turn towards the runway and get themselves aligned with the runway, if not visually, but by the ILS approach, and then there's the Sabin point. So you got the meaning? It's coming from Lahore, from, you would say, from north to south, because Karachi is in south of Pakistan and Lahore is towards this the northern side. So I will just take two directions. So it's coming from, it's gonna go to Nawab Shah first, descend down to a certain height, then 45 degrees angle towards Makli. Once it reaches Makli, it's gonna make another 45-degree angle and get aligned with runway 25R, 25 left, 25L, 25 left is 250 heading. Your compass should be showing. So that's where it descends down, and then there's a holding pattern. Yes, perfectly right. And then you get aligned with the runway and you just land. So it was given the initial joining point 1, Nawab Shah, uptown near Karachi, where when there's a lot of traffic in the air, then all the planes are advised to go there because they hold a certain pattern and then they descend down while keeping the clearway off to their left all the time. And so that they don't get into another aircraft. They don't descend directly down one straight line. They get into a circular pattern descent.
The plane decided to take the plane down. At 9:15 a.m. local time, the pilots wanted to get down to 10,000 feet. The controllers cleared them in and asked them to fly directly towards the waypoint Makli.
Stop. Here we go. Now, all those who talk about standard operating procedures, you gave the clearance for the initial descent to the aircraft to go to a longer waypoint, a longer joining point, Nawab Shah, out of Karachi city. And once it asked you, it was around 15 to 20,000 feet when it asked you to ask the ADC, or the tower in this case, to descend down to further 10,000 feet. Means that aircraft was above 10,000 feet. And now you are telling the aircraft to join Makli instead of going towards a waypoint further away. You ask it to make a shortcut. What SOPs were followed? Now, LOPs have been mentioned here, and now LOPs weigh much weight than the SOPs, right? Totally taken that, which I said in my initial opening statement, that local operating procedures sometimes carry more weightage than the standard operating procedures. But under what rules did he cut his descent? Now imagine that his direction is totally different. His speeds are totally different. His way of descending is totally different. His descent rate is totally different. And now he has to move towards the 45-degree waypoint, Makli, the second joining point, and now he has to change everything. Okay, so that was the first mistake done by the tower. You believe it or not, but yes, this initiated the initial spark.
This meant that they wouldn't have to fly the Nawab Shah approach, and this was shorter. Here's the Makli and Nawab Shah approaches compared. In the cockpit, the pilots programmed the FMS, or the flight management system, for the ILS Zulu approach to runway 25 left. At 9:23 a.m., the controllers came on and said, Pakistan A303, contact approach 125.5. But
now, if you look at my previous video, where I Brancolari, Juan Brown, when he made his final report assessment, I said the same thing. So my question remains the same. Once the tower is initially in touch with PK-803 and giving them instructions, and they are getting Roger that, Roger copied, that they don't have to descend to Nawab Shah 2 or Nawab Shah 1, they can go to descent point Makli directly. On what frequency? And why would they ask them to change to 125.5? Now, that's what's missing on the report, and that's what's missing reported by this person because he has no idea. So here, what I said, that the tower did tell PK-8303 to change to 126.5, which is not the standard operating procedure, which is not the local operating procedures. Again, in case of many aircrafts in the air, then different frequencies are still given, but avoided, because all the aircraft in the area has to be on the one frequency so they could hear each other. What instructions are given to what aircraft, what height they are. Otherwise, we're going to end up in crashing with each other. But PK8303 was given 126.5, and on final report, there's a knob movement as well. So there we go. This is missing, and even he has no idea how they got on different frequencies. How? They just didn't, pilots were not like, oh, oopsie. I got changed to just one decimal away, 125.5. Instead of 125.5, they were on 126.5 because they were instructed. Now, this is my claim, not Schrodinger's cat. My claim, they were instructed by the tower to switch to 126.5, which was a mistake by the tower. They shouldn't have been there. They should be on the frequency 125.5. They were not given. And so, PK8303 went RT blind from 923 till 925.
There was no reply. They tried again.
Of course.
No reply.
Of course.
They tried again.
Of
no
course.
Reply. After 3 attempts, the controllers tried to get a plane nearby to relay a message to the Airbus A320, but still nothing.
Of course.
Then, out of options, the controllers called flight A303 on the Gorge frequency.
Yeah.
The Gorge frequency, for those of you that don't know, is a frequency that is monitored by all pilots and controllers. It's there for emergencies like this one. But A303 still hadn't responded after 2 radio calls. Then,
that's a lie. Now they're preparing for and they're totally RT silenced. They can't hear any calls. And sometimes that happens. There was another incident in which the aircraft went into the restricted area of the landing on Islamabad airport. Went into a restricted area of let me say the name, Kahuta Research Laboratories, where our nuclear program was initially, worked on. So that's a boundary line for the aircraft to get in. And the pilots, they confessed the mistake they did. You see, this is a radio frequency, and the radio frequency, if you select, it works on AM as well, it works on FM as well, normally below a couple of thousand feet above ground level. We used to switch on to FM 100. That was a famous radio station back then in Pakistan. FM 101. 111, 100. I remember the sound even. Back in 1993, 4, 5, those were the years. And they used to play, pop songs. So once we were on solo and no aircrafts around, we would switch to FM 100 for a while, and listen to the music, and then, because if ADC calls you and you are not there, I'm talking about the Air Force, you'll be punished. So what people do, so anyhow, we're talking about that incident. He was on a radio frequency set to another aircraft nearby, who was his friend, and they were talking to each other. And then the pilot forgot to switch it back to whatever the area frequency was. So he could never get the calls from Islamabad radar control, and they kept going into the restricted area. Because there's a time when the aircraft controller or the radar control tells them to make a almost 175-degree turn, not the bank turn, heading turn, and then they would be aligned with Islamabad ILS, the runway 30. There's only one ILS is installed in Islamabad airport, and that's towards the runway 300, runway 30. But they missed those points, and the rocket launchers were pointing at them, and that was a time when, because they were switched to the other frequency, and the guard frequency was called, and the aircraft he was in touch with on the private frequency told them that this would have happened. So anyhow, that accident didn't happen. They were not hit by the rockets. Otherwise, it takes 45 seconds for the rockets to be put, and then this anti-aircraft gun, they start shooting anything coming into that area. Very restricted. So that was also reported on the news as well. Those pilots both they told that had happened, and then when they checked, it did happen. So the conversation between the pilots had happened in the same way. They were also talking about the same thing. They were saying, okay, here is why there is RT silence, because those two pilots were entering into Kahuta, the research laboratories area. They also had the same conversation with each other. RT is too silent. No one is calling. We don't hear anything around us. And the first officer confirming, yes, probably sir, there's not much traffic, so not much going on. That's why. And they kept going toward here, the same thing. I can't rule out the same problem happening. Pilots probably have talked to each other about this RT silence for 2 minutes where they stopped their descent, by the way. If you check your FDR data, they stopped descending down. One, they were supposed to go to Nawab Shah. If they would have gone to Nawab Shah, they would have been on the perfect height, which is required for landing. That was cut off. Second, RT silence, so their descent approach from 2,000 feet per minute got up to around 400 to 500 feet per minute, because they didn't know what aircraft is under them and it's RT silence around them. So 9:25 they got in touch.
After the third radio call, they came on and said, "Strength 2, sir, confirmed, change over to 126.5. Contact was reestablished."
See, the pilot is saying he is actually commanding we're telling the Karachi Tower to tell ADCO to change over to 126.5, because they were on 126.5 and they were given 126.5. But everyone around was given 125.5. So it's the tower control's problem. He was fasting. He went for the prayers, which I will tell later. So he was not in his right mind. These two pilots, they were not fasting, because it's not written anywhere in the report that they were fasting. So if someone is saying, but they put that in the report just to make the narrators fool.
Established with Flight A303. Once the jet had been handed over to Karachi Approach cleared them all the way down to 3,000 feet. By this point, the jet was at Mackley, the waypoint that we were talking about before. Yeah. But there was just one small problem. They were way higher than they needed to be.
Of course. They lost 2 minutes of RT silence because of the Karachi Tower mistake. And instead of going to the first joining point, they were asked directly, once they were coming from 20,000 feet to 15,000 feet, they were asked directly to join a shorter waypoint. So and then even then they couldn't maintain that same descent. They were in the descent mode, which is being mentioned later by the same person who's narrating this thing. So the aircraft in a descent mode goes to a certain point at a certain height, and it controls the pitch up and pitch down movement. Period.
See, by the time they hit Mackley, the jet needed to be stabilized at 3,000 feet. Flight A303 was closer to 9,000 feet. The controllers chimed in and asked, "Pakistan 8303 confirmed track mile comfortable for descent," which basically translates to, "You guys sure that you can make this?"
Now tell me, in what part of the world an ADCO uses the word comfortable? By the way, the same was discussed by Mentor Pilot and Juan Brown once they had the live telecast 3 years ago. And actually, Juan Brown also said that this is not standard protocol of calling anyone. By the way, the ADC officer was very junior. He was born in 1992, and he'd had like 4 or 5 years of experience. Being an ADCO. That's it. That was all his experience, which showed his inexperience, which led to this disaster. So this is not a way of calling someone. "Oh, sir, would you like to land? Even you are 10,000 feet. Give them a go round. Give them an orbit right away." But nothing of that sort happened.
Pilots just replied with, "Affirm."
Yeah, pilots are.
At this point in the cockpit, there was confusion. The captain said, "What has happened? Take out the hold," referring to the holding pattern that the computer had programmed in so that they could lose altitude. The first officer just replied with, "Hold taken out. Should we report this happening?"
Okay, now this is the way of narration, how you narrate a problem. If you read the report, the captain got actually panicked. He said it 3 times: "Take out the hold, take out the hold, take out the hold." And now it says in the report, it says in Urdu. Now, Urdu is a language in which we don't have some words in our language, they don't exist. For example, take off the plane. It doesn't exist. In Urdu, it would be like a little different, take off. Now, take out the hold. There is no word for hold in Pakistani language, in Urdu. Okay, take out I could understand that they would say nikalo. I could say that. They would have said hold nikalo, hold nikalo, hold nikalo. That's the only explanation I can do about this translation that they would have said. But still, hold nikalo, 50% is English and 50% is Urdu. But the report clearly says in Urdu. Well, we'll come up to that when they perform the go round. We don't have any word for go round in Urdu language. We don't have any word for take off in Urdu. And the pilot says that take off, sir, in Urdu. And I was thinking, how do they say that in Urdu? And I asked a lot of my aviational friends as well who are serving in Airbus. I said, do you use the word? And see, Pakistan was a colony of Britain for 300 years. In 1947, India and Pakistan became new countries. And even now, even the India, you can go and see, although they talk like this, and Pakistanis have also a weird accent. So even if you take out any political watch show, any news reporting is a typical 100% trying to be 100% in Urdu language only. But the other things, Pakistani, even the commentary on cricket in Urdu, even the political talk shows, any English speaker would understand 50% of that, and we're talking in Urdu, because most of the conversation, especially it's the status quo, that you have to talk in a foreign language. You have to add words to it. Fruit is always a fruit in Pakistani language. We have the alternate word for that, but no one used that. Hostel, where the people live, the dormitory, which you call, no word. Hotel, no word in Urdu. We do have, people don't use them. Those words have been diminished. So here, hold on. So something did happen to the aircraft at that time, and it could be due to the hold. Now they didn't want to hold, just like the ADC or the radar, the tower didn't want them to go to a longer way and got them to the shortcut because of the COVID restrictions, and the aircraft is out after a long time, and there's only one aircraft in the air, so it totally makes sense. So why get yourself into a hold, you know? So that's what has happened. But something did happen at that time, because that's when it says, should we report this happening? Now you're coming, the aircraft is telling you to get into the holding pattern, right? And you don't want to, right? So what will you do? You will take out the hold. Once you take it out from the computer, the aircraft will go straight. But at that time, something did happen. And that's why the first officer asked the captain, or the captain asked the first officer, probably it's the first officer asking the captain, who was the flying pilot, by the way, should we report something happened? Now, what could have happened? The Airbus pilots would tell you. So they're coming down, and the pilot said, take it out. Take the hold out, and the problem would be solved, whatever the problem was. And then they got into the open descent mode.
Captain just says, no, this could be due to the hold. Tell Karachi approach that we're stuck.
What could be due to the hold? Okay. So you're coming, you're higher, okay, makes sense. Coming into the descent, okay. The aircraft tells you to get into the hold because you're high, hot and high, and you disregard that because you can, yeah, to save some fuel, to save some money for the airliners. You can disregard that. It's up to you. It's standard operating procedure, but you can disregard that because you're not crossing the limitations of the aircraft. So this could have happened due to hold. Now that's a question which should be asked. So if these narrators, if they have the answer to that one, do let me know, because I have the answers and I will let in my next videos.
On the localizer. The captain wanted to go ahead with the landing. In a normal landing, you're supposed to come in towards the runway at a shallow 3-degree angle. Flight 8303 was nowhere near that. They were almost at 6 degrees. Now, this
is 6 degrees angle not landable? Keeping that you are 15, 16 nautical miles away, you are at certain height. No. The ILS approach gives you limitations. If you are at 15 degrees of angle and it's 3 degrees, okay, that's not interceptable. Yeah, because you have to give a margin of around 10% to get rolled. Otherwise you're going to be dragged and get into the ground directly. 6 degree is still under limitations. Thank you.
That they'd have to intercept the glide slope from above. While this isn't uncommon, it's much harder than intercepting the glide slope from below.
So there comes the opinion, personal opinion. Much harder. I don't know if this person has any experience of flying, but those people who were 17,000 of hours of flying, they knew what they were doing. And it is doable. It's a little harder, I would say, but it's doable.
To get down fast, the pilots extended the speed brakes, increasing the drag on the plane.
So you have to get the speed breakers out on the sides of the wings. They reduce and the same is the case. First you get the speed breakers down, where the speed comes down to a certain limit. Then you get the gears down, and once the gears are fully retracted and locked, then you get the flaps down to different positions, so the speed comes down, and then you get to full flaps down. So this is the way: speed breakers, gears, flap ones, and then so on. And once we're retracting everything, same sequence goes back.
Karachi Tower was watching all of this unfold.
Ooh.
Karachi Tower then called up Karachi Approach on a hotline to let them know that Flight 8303 was too high. The approach controller just said that he'd let them orbit for a bit to lose altitude. But
now here, Karachi Tower was watching all the time, and that's also his personal opinion. Karachi Tower, at that time, because that's closer to 1:15. Normally the Jummah prayers, the Friday prayers, they start at 1:30, but before that you have to go and offer your 4 sunnat ghair muqadda. The Muslims, they would understand. And before that is a sermon. And normally now, because of the cell phones, the sermon given by the imam could be heard on the phone, which is like mostly the stories and the hadith and Quran, so kind of sermon. It's kind of a speech actually, and then you offer those 4 sunnat al-muqadda, and then you go for 2 farz, and then again 4 sunnat muqadda, and then 2, and then followed by 2 nafils. Not knuckles, nafils. These are terminologies used in Muslim world. So at that time he contacted them on hotline, and what did he say? Oh, they are too high. Because the tower guy, he can see them. Did he? Because at that time the gears were down and locked. Speed breakers were out, flaps were down. Yep. Just now he mentioned, just now. But they were a little high. And this is where the ADC said, oh, don't worry. I know. And I will put them in an orbit. Did he? Anywhere from that time onwards until the end. Tell me, where did he order them to get into the orbit? Nowhere. He's suggesting them. First, he's being apologetic in the beginning. Oh, are you comfortable, sir? Would you like some tea? Bullshit. And here, he's suggesting them instead of being in it. An ADC officer is the one. Even in Pakistan, if an ADC officer doesn't clear you to land and you land, you'd be charged for treason. After 911, the aviational laws in Pakistan are also very strict. ADC officer doesn't clear you, you dare not land. And there's no example of that one. This person, criminal, he did give them clearance to land at 1,000 feet. which will come later.
Despite the speed brakes being out, the plane was still too high when they were 10 nautical miles from the runway. They were supposed to be at 3,000 feet, but instead they were at 7,239 feet. But the pilots were committed to this landing. Along with the speed brakes, they dropped the gear and pointed the nose down in an attempt to get down in time. The plane was now 7.4 degrees nose down. Karachi Approach, at this point, out of concern, said, "Sir, an orbit is available if you want it." The response was,
See, here there should be assertion. The orbit is available if you want it. Again, would you like a cup of coffee as well, sir? No, bad approach. Bad, not the landing approach, but bad way to deal with this kind of situation by the ADC officer.
"Negative, sir, we are comfortable. We can make it, inshallah."
Inshallah means God willing, because if they could cut down the Nawab Shah at that time and then still be on the same height and on the required height at Makli, and from Makli they're coming down, that's where they are a few thousand feet high, but keeping the air traffic limitations in mind, they could totally make it.
The jet continued to close in on the runway. 6.5 nautical miles from the runway, they were at 3,800 feet. But they still hadn't intercepted the localizer. The pilots pushed the nose down further, this time all the way down to negative 13.7 degrees. At this point, the autopilot cut out because the pilots were commanding really aggressive nose-down inputs, and also because of an internal disagreement between the computers. In the cockpit, a litany of warnings were going off. You had the master warning and the CRC warning going off because the jet was exceeding its max speed with the flaps extended, and also because the autopilot system had been disconnected. Then, right after that, the GPWS, or the ground proximity warning system, activated. The jet was screaming towards the ground. It had a descent rate of 7,400 feet per minute at some points. As sink rate and pull-up warnings blared in the cockpit, the first officer pulled back on the stick and arrested the descent of the plane.
Now, all these incidents which he said, of course you are at 3,000 feet, where you should be at around 1,500 feet, and 2,000 feet, by the way. At this point, they were above 1,000 feet only. And what would you do? Of course, in their case, the side stick. You have to nose down to get into that glide path, right? And aviation laws, once you are nose down, the speed increases. Once the speed increases, you have your flaps down, you have your gears down, you have your speed breakers down. All these warning lights would turn on because you're almost gonna hit the maximum speed for flaps first, then the landing gears, then the speed breakers, and then the slats or whatever is out there. So those lights would turn on. So the pilot, the flying pilot, is the first officer, and they're sitting on the right side of the cockpit, and the captain is on the left side of the cockpit. They're dealing. One of them is dealing with those lights, turning them off, making them silent, keeping them quiet, while the first officer is still concentrating on landing. But now he knows, I can't do that. We can't land on 1/3 of the runway because we have extra speed, 190 knots in that case, and we would touch down at about 5,000 to 6,000 feet on the runway, and the whole runway is 14,000 feet. So by applying full brakes, which you actually mentioned, by applying full brakes and the reversers on, we would still have to burst all our wheels, gears, and then we probably could stop at the end of the runway. Probably. Because 10 years ago, prior to this flight, around I think May 21st, it was in India, when that aircraft, same Airbus 320, landed at 4,500 feet of the runway, and they couldn't stop. Their speed was lower than this aircraft. Everything was lower than this aircraft, and that aircraft went into a valley, killing all 156 people. So the pilot initiated the go-round.
They were still above the glide slope, and they still had a descent rate of 5,300 feet per minute. In the midst of all of this chaos, the landing...
limitations were not crossed. Midst of this chaos, the landing gears,
Gear was accidentally retracted.
holy cow, accidentally retracted. Who told you that, sir? Who told you that it was accidentally retracted? The report doesn't say anywhere. The report says very clearly that the first officer, the flying pilot, he had the controls. Because his side of control panel had the landing gears up sign. He got the speed breakers out. And again, the sequence is the same. First, you get the gears up, and then you get the speed breakers in or out. How. In this case, it would be in. It wasn't in accidentally. That's wrong narrating an incident.
Along with the speed brakes. As the gear came back up, Karachi Tower cleared Pakistan International Airlines Flight A303 to land.
Ho, ho, ho. The gears were initiated at 2,300 feet above ground level, about 5 nautical miles away from, because at that time they already were in, the first officer, the flying pilot, was already under the impression that they can't land it there. So what he does first, he gets the nose up, he gets the gears up, he gets the speed breakers in, and the aircraft would take some time, to pitch up, maintain the speed, and then would go around. And which took them to get down to around 1,100 feet above ground level and around 1 to 1.5 nautical miles away from the threshold of the runway. And that was the time when this plane is still nose down and coming towards the runway. Now the tower guy, now he's misreporting here. It's not the tower, it's the Karachi control who gave the call to clear to land. The tower guy on his binoculars should have been watching this aircraft coming nose down without any gears, because the gears already had locked up, because it says very clearly in the report as well. And now, did they have communication with each other? The report doesn't say that. Oops. Now, the flying pilot normally has the controls, and whatever decisions he makes, they do, inform each other verbally, but they didn't tell us that one. So at 1,100 feet above ground level, which is, no height at all for an aircraft, even the spooling time of the engines would still get the plane touch the threshold and then get into the air. And with this go round, with this touchdown, now see, that's the time when pilot already took care of all the lights, warning lights in the cockpit, and the autopilots got disengaged. Now you have to land manually with your side sticks, and you have to put pressure on the side stick. By the way, it's just a millimeter up and down, left and right. It's very feeble movements because fly by air. Now the junior first officer, he cannot land the aircraft manually or perform a go round, because this is now not the machine's decision. It's the man, the experienced man. He has to hold the cockpit. He has to be in control of the cockpit, and that's why the captain took the controls at 1,100 feet, because the ADC guy cleared them to land. Why? When he knows everything is hot and high and he's not on the right glide path and not on the right approach, he has the rights to not to let them land. And his advice would be taken into consideration by the captain. There's no problem that how senior that captain is, how old that captain is. Once ADC officer believed, because as you said, that he had been calling hundreds of times, not to land, disregard, turning left, disregard, turn left, blah, 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 blah. Why would you clear to land at 1,100 feet? And the tower guy, he should have told them that the aircraft doesn't have gears, because he can see it. The ADC guy can't. The guy in the tower, he can. But did he? Was he there? He was absent from duty. And then that chain of reaction, the first part of until the touchdown, the first part, I totally blame the radar control, the Karachi Tower, which are possibly the same thing, and the ADCO for putting those pilots into those conditions where they have to take, extraordinary steps. Part two, I will talk about that later.
The pilots were now struggling to keep the plane on glide, having gotten it somewhere in the vicinity of where it should be. But this plane was still going way too fast. The plane made sure to let the pilots know through its warnings. The first officer was now a little bit concerned, and he asks, "Should we do the orbit?" The captain just says, No, leave it. And
Yeah. Because he already initiated the go-round, and 1,100 feet, the ADC officer clears to land, and the captain says, "Why not?" Now, did he get the gears down? We don't know. Did he get the speed brakes in or out or the flaps down? We don't know. This report doesn't say, and this doesn't have to say, because if you don't say that, then people will speculate. Oh, again, 3 years ago, everyone believed that pilots forgot to lower the gears down, and 3 years from now you people believe that they did lower the gears down, and they did initiate a go round, because nose up means you are going up. Speed breakers in means you don't want to land now. Gears up means you would not. But once one of the officer is doing the same things to perform a go around, and because of the initial 13.7 minus 13.7 pitch down, when the autopilots got disengaged, now the senior pilot has to take the control of the aircraft. So he did. And at the same time, the ADC tells you clear to land. So all this confusion, well, why not? Let's land. So the first thing would be check if your gears are down or locked or not. Now your speed is probably, at that time they were at 200 knots, so if they lowered the gears down, they would have gotten the gears down, because the gear limit is 220 knots, but again, we don't know.
then starts pushing the nose of the plane down using his side stick. He was the one flying now.
See, he confirms it, because that's what I said. At 1,100 feet, the captain took the controls because autopilots were disengaged, and that's, again, even in any part of the world, when the autopilots get disengaged, mostly the experienced pilot on that aircraft takes controls.
It's just 1.9 nautical miles from the runway, and at 1,000 feet. As this happened,
Okay, 1,000 feet, yeah. Final report says 1,147 feet.
a message popped up on the ECAM. The ECAM stands for the Electronic Centralized Aircraft Monitor. It's a central hub where you can see all sorts of things about your Airbus airplane. If you need to troubleshoot something, you go to the ECAM. Anyway, it threw up a red warning, and it said, landing gear, not down. The arrows on the land.
No, the final report doesn't say that. Landing gears, not down. And there's no cockpit voice recorder as well. Well, they turned the ECAMs off. The ECAM voice sound, pilot is trying to concentrate on landing, so of course he has to turn extra voices, get them off. But on ECAM, the warnings still appear. So he is wrong about that. No. The ECAM was not turned off. The sounds were turned off. The alarms were turned off. But on the display, everything was still popping out, whatever it was, which the final report doesn't say. Again, this is this guy's own assumption.
Landing gear levers went bright red to warn the pilots. Normally you'd have an oral warning as well, but the overspeed warning took precedence, so that warning was generated.
No, they canceled it. The final report says very clearly. The verbal warnings were canceled.
Captain had had enough of the warnings, and he asked the first officer to cancel the warnings out.
Okay, he mentioned that one now, but that initiated when, as soon as the captain took the controls, he informed the pilots to, get rid of the verbal warnings.
This allowed for the landing gear warning to get through, which was a continuous repetitive chime. But that was quickly replaced by the too low terrain and sink rate and pull-up warnings.
No.
But the jet continued to go down despite the warnings. During all of this, the jet had picked up some serious speed. The pilots now had to get the plane from 225 knots all the way down to 152 knots.
Yeah, they set the speed on the autopilot to 152 knots, but the autopilots were disengaged. And the plane, when it entered the runway, it was at 190 plus knots, not 225 knots. That's wrong.
But it was out of time. Even though the engines were pulled back to idle, the jet was out of altitude. The A320 landed wheels up on runway 25 left at 200 knots, and a screech was heard in the cockpit. The pilots tried braking, but it had no effect. The jet continued to scrape along the runway. In the cockpit, the pilots were trying to engage the reversers, but that would not happen as the conditions for reverser deployment had not been met because the wheels were on the ground, even though the plane was. In the cockpit, the first officer frantically said, "Take off, sir, take off," and the throttles were pushed to max.
Now, we'll just stay till here. Again, his order is not right. First thing which happened was, you got a meeting. The first officer left the controls while initiating the go around. All the other conditions were met, and autopilot. As soon as they got disengaged, the captain, he took the controls, and by clicking on the one who has the controls just has to click on the side stick, and the first officer would acknowledge, not verbally, but that would appear on his screen as well. So now he has the controls. Now, first officer is thinking that we are going to go around because that's what they decided, both of them. Otherwise he cannot make his own decisions, especially the first officer, although he was the flying pilot. But yet, before initiating go around, he has to confirm with the captain because captain is more senior than him. And once he initiated that one, the captain takes the controls over, and that's the same time when the ADC says clear to land. Now, captain thinks that why not? So his input is still nose down, and he's trying to, I think, get the speed brakes out again, and get the gears down, and get the flaps down. And he's very short distance. He's only 2 nautical miles, 1.5 nautical miles away from the runway with that speed going on, and his nose is already down. So now he has to pitch up the nose to get the speed lower and lower because all other things are not there. And he put the reversers in contact before touching the ground. That report says very clearly the reversers were pushed down so that the engine reverse thrust should be active as soon as it touches down. Now, I don't know whether on impact they get touchdown or with the landing gears down and locked. So any Airbus person would tell you. And once they touch down, assuming, because it takes 14 seconds for the gears to come down and get locked on Airbus. So now imagine they're coming down from 1100 into the threshold. It takes, you could calculate next time, I think less than 14 seconds. So there's a possibility that the gears would not come out by the time of touchdown. So probably they held it on top of the runway for a little bit of time because we call it the flaring out. So once you're coming down on the glide approach, you flare out, you go parallel with the runway for a few feet, and then you get the power off, and then sync check. You down. So they did their flare out, I think, because the aircraft was not in it. This tells very clearly that if they were coming nose down like this, the nose would have hit the runway first. But what hit the runway first? The left engine. Means they were nose up. So that's what I said. They flared out a little late. Then once they were about to touch down, once they were buying some times for the gears to come down and get locked. So, and at that time of the landing with that airspeed, with those much jittering around, you can't physically feel that if the gears were down and locked or not. So the only way to check it out is touchdown. They did. He applied the brakes. 14 seconds, speed was not reducing, and nothing was happening. The aircraft was not slowing down. What do? Get the throttles back up. Go around. Now this one, it says in the report, in Urdu, take off. Take off, sir, take off. Now, I challenge the whole aviation industry to find a word for takeoff in Urdu. Thank you.
But here's the thing. Engine number 2 had been dragged along the runway a lot more than engine number 1, and it now had a low oil pressure warning. But
Yeah,
engine
that's
number
true.
1 roared to life and the jet started to lift off again. At 9:34 a.m., the A320 was airborne again. As the jet climbed out, the pilots called the two.
Now, I would have one more correction. That's the last correction of mine for this guy. He asked that at the end, almost at the end of the flight, the pilot was looking for an alternate runway, which was the Air Force runway, which is also 250 on the heading. So if this is the 250, that's the end of the runway. Then there is a highway in between, and then the landing strip of Faisal Base starts. So it's right in front of the Karachi airport, same directions. So now they go around, they were given 110, I think. So you're flying at 250, okay? 360 is this way towards your right, right? 110 degrees. And then 110, there's 220 degrees. So once you give 110 to the autopilot, it would go toward the shortest distance, which would be turning left. So the aircraft already turned left towards 110 degrees and started flying back from where it came from. So they know that the alternate runway, they've missed it already. But she still, or they didn't turn. There's a possibility. They still went straight. Because at 9:34, when she initiated the go round, there were 8 minutes of flying. And if you see from Makli to the touchdown, it's 6 minutes. They took 6 minutes from Makli, the initial point where they were very high, to to the touchdown, 9:34. And well, you could say at 9:23, when 9:25 when they established with the tower, and from 9:25 till touchdown, it took them 9 minutes to come from 9,000 feet to touchdown point, and from takeoff 9:34 till the crash 9:42, there were 8 minutes. So you're getting my point. And they couldn't exceed to 9,000 feet. They were almost at 2,000 feet all the time. So these 8 minutes, which way they went, where they traveled, is missing in the report. The flight path from where they came, where they went, is totally missing. But if you see all the reports back published in Pakistan, the flight path of the aircraft are given Air Blue 202, the ATR crash, and the second ATR crash, flight to Kathmandu, they all have flight paths. This one, no. Why not? The next video. It's already 1 hour long. Thank you.